Tonight on 24, a new wave of attacks on the Islamic Republic's military positions, Qeshm Island, Bandar Abbas, and Bushehr, among the targets of today's U.S. attacks. Iran's widespread missile response to Kuwait and Bahrain.
Minister of Iraq has been amazing. He won an election that a lot of people didn't anticipate could be won by anybody.
In a meeting with the Iraqi Prime Minister, Trump said that with the end of Tehran's bullying, we are witnessing a new Middle East. Al-Kadhimi's emphasis on changing the nature of relations with Washington from military to economic.
Iran is willing to threaten the Strait of Hormuz. How long before the Houthis...
Meanwhile, the U.S., representative to the United Nations, has issued a stark warning regarding the growing simultaneous threats facing both the Strait of Hormuz and the Red Sea. Washington asserts that the coordinated actions of the Islamic Republic of Iran and Houthi rebels pose a direct danger to global freedom of navigation in these vital waterways. Live from the Iran International Studio, this is 24 with Fardad Farahzad. Hello, and a very good day to our Iran International viewers tuning in from inside Iran and across the globe. Tonight, the escalating retaliatory attacks between the Islamic Republic and the United States continue to intensify. Reports indicate a fresh wave of powerful explosions across several parts of Iran, alongside missile strikes on the other side of the Persian Gulf. In Bushehr, the deputy governor for security confirmed that 4 locations were targeted by what he described as enemy projectiles. Meanwhile, consecutive explosions have been reported in Bandar Abbas and near Dimashq. Across the Gulf, officials in Bahrain and Kuwait have reported missile attacks launched by the Islamic Republic. Amidst these developments, U.S. President Donald Trump, standing alongside the new Iraqi Prime Minister just an hour ago, stated that the Islamic Republic has severely harmed its own people, Iraq, and the wider region for years, but declared that it no longer possesses its former power and can no longer bully others.
I genuinely believe everything will work out in the end. Believe it or not, the Middle East is actually doing remarkably well right now. We are finally witnessing the removal of the ultimate bully of the region, which is Iran. For years, Iran was actively bullying Iraq and terrorizing almost all neighboring nations. Deep-seated fear ruled among all the countries in the Middle East, a painful reality that I fully understand. However, this paralyzing fear no longer exists today because Iran's aggressive military capabilities have been systematically destroyed and completely wiped out. Consequently, I believe this new Middle East is becoming united and integrated like never before. You simply cannot have a dominant, overbearing factor like Iran, a regime that has tragically killed over 52,000 protesters, a shocking loss of life that many people fail to talk about. In my opinion, the entire Middle East is becoming united.
My colleague Marzieh Hosseini joins us from the U.S. Congress. Marzieh, it seems like we are back to those very first days of the war again.
In an escalation of Middle Eastern geopolitics, the United States has officially returned to a state of war, marked by President Donald Trump's recent formal letter delivered to the United States Congress. This historic shift became reality exactly 6 hours ago, when the United States military initiated a strict physical blockade of the strategic Strait of Hormuz. Legally and operationally, this decisive naval maneuver places the United States in a direct state of war with the Islamic Republic of Iran. Concurrently, regional dynamics have shifted rapidly, as several key Arab nations have officially joined the coalition efforts. These regional allies have already begun launching coordinated missile strikes into Iranian airspace, targeting defense infrastructure and establishing a multi-front military pressure campaign designed to neutralize Iranian retaliation capabilities and secure the immediate airspace. At the center of the diplomatic chaos is President Trump's sudden backtracking on his controversial proposal to implement a 20% transit toll on maritime vessels navigating the Strait of Hormuz. The initial proposal met with an immediate and fierce wave of bipartisan backlash in Washington, D.C. High-profile conservative figures, including Senators Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance, led the criticism, arguing forcefully that the Strait of Hormuz is an internationally recognized waterway governed by global transit laws. Critics and commentators openly questioned whether the United States government was degrading its foreign policy by behaving like a mercenary private security company. Trump quickly framed his reversal, claiming he abandoned the toll after prominent Arab leaders stepped forward to offer some of the largest financial investments in United States history instead, thereby offsetting the costs of the military operation. Prior to this strategic reversal, Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, had taken to social media to mock the American administration. Araghchi wryly posted that while it is true security providers deserve compensation for their efforts, Iran itself could secure the vital shipping lanes far more efficiently and at a fraction of the cost proposed by the United States. Despite the rhetoric, the practical reality on the water is grim. The newly enforced blockade has brought commercial maritime traffic to a grinding halt. According to the latest tracking data from Kepler, only 12 ships have successfully transited the strait since the blockade began. Consequently, global energy markets have reacted with panic, causing crude oil prices to surge by 12% within a 24-hour window. This represents the single largest one-day price spike of the conflict so far, driving oil prices well past $87 per barrel. President Trump's formal war declaration to Congress, despite carrying significant domestic legal and political risks, signals to both allies and adversaries his absolute decisiveness and readiness for a potentially prolonged conflict. The administration appears committed to maintaining this posture until its strategic objectives are met. Meanwhile, Israel remains in a state of high combat readiness, prepared for immediate escalation. This posture of total deterrence and readiness was recently confirmed during our exclusive interview with Israel's spokesperson to the United Nations, who emphasized that their forces are fully synchronized with American operations and prepared for retaliatory scenarios.
Israel remains prepared, both defensively and offensively, to counter any potential threat, provocation, or direct aggression originating from the Islamic Republic of Iran. This robust state of readiness is reinforced by our deep, enduring, and highly strategic security cooperation with the United States. Together, our joint intelligence sharing and coordinated military planning ensure that we can neutralize any regional threat. Reflecting on recent diplomatic efforts, there has always been a deep-seated and entirely logical skepticism shared by both the Israeli public and the citizens of Iran. When rumors first circulated that the United States and the regime in Tehran might reach a diplomatic accord, many viewed the prospective memorandum of understanding not as a path to peace, but as a memorandum of profound misunderstanding. For observers on both sides, it was incomprehensible how a regime that has systematically massacred tens of thousands of its own citizens, crushing domestic dissent with brutal force, and repeatedly violated its international treaty obligations, could ever act as a reliable partner in a good faith peace agreement. Unsurprisingly, these diplomatic avenues have now reached a definitive dead end, proving those early doubts entirely correct. Today, the regional behavior of the Islamic Republic continues to validate the skepticism. Tehran persists in its destabilizing activities in the critical shipping lanes of the Strait of Hormuz, threatening global trade and energy security. Furthermore, the regime has adopted an increasingly hostile stance toward its neighbors in the Persian Gulf, effectively waging a shadow war against nations such as Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates, Oman, and Qatar. Through these aggressive actions, the international community has once again witnessed the true, unvarnished nature of the Iranian regime. While predicting timelines for geopolitical conflict is notoriously difficult, it is universally understood that war, especially a prolonged campaign, is never a desirable outcome. No nation seeks conflict. However, history teaches us that when dealing with a relentless and ideological adversary like the Islamic Republic, the credible threat or actual use of military force remains a necessary instrument of deterrence. To secure long-term stability, several critical objectives must be achieved. Chief among these is dismantling Iran's nuclear ambitions. Although diplomatic constraints may have temporarily slowed their progress, the regime's underlying desire and scientific expertise remain fully intact, concentrated in heavily fortified key facilities that must be permanently addressed. Additionally, we must neutralize their advanced ballistic missile program and hold their hostile leadership accountable. Significant progress has indeed been made, but a substantial amount of work still lies ahead.
Well, Fardad, that's about the Israelis. But as for the Arab countries in the region, reports have just come in that apparently they called Mr. Trump 2 days ago and said that yes, apparently the Islamic Republic only understands the language of missiles. And based on a report specifically published by Axios, they are now participating with the US in the attacks on Iran. And these are considered joint attacks in a way. They say the reason this operation didn't happen before was the Qataris. They were very keen to negotiate and be peace mediators. But after the recent attacks by the Islamic Republic on Qatar, not only did they give the green light for these attacks, but they also stopped the process of releasing the Islamic Republic's frozen assets. And we are now witnessing the alliance of the Arab countries in the region against the Islamic Republic, something absent over past months.
Thank you. My colleague Marzieh Hosseini from the U.S. Congress in Washington, Shahir Shahid Saleh, International Relations and Iran Affairs Analyst from Calgary, and Leila Moravati, Political Analyst from Helsinki are with us. Mr. Shahid Saleh, well, now, in an unprecedented way, especially after the end of the first phase of the war, tensions have risen again. Do you think this has changed the position of the two countries for gaining leverage, or have we entered a full-scale war?
That is indeed a highly perceptive and important question, Mr. Farahzad. Like you, I am deeply curious about the underlying strategic motivations behind President Trump's recent geopolitical maneuver. Is the primary goal to permanently secure and free the critical Strait of Hormuz for global shipping? Or is this ultimately a broader effort aimed at destabilizing and overthrowing the Islamic Republic regime? These perplexing and strange questions naturally come to one's mind if they truly believed they were going to achieve results by blockading Iran and through the threat of war, and we must remember that the strategic Strait of Hormuz was closed by the Islamic Republic. If those aggressive methods were destined to succeed, why did you stop the blockade? Why did you halt the war? Why did you choose to sit down the negotiating table? Why did you sign a formal memorandum of understanding, even proudly holding up your signature in front of the TV cameras? Well, why did you do those things? If that didn't achieve results, why should it work this time? Because under the War Powers Act that Mr. Trump has now declared to Congress, he has 60 days to continue this war. What do you want to do in these 60 days? Do you want to free the Strait of Hormuz in a way that shipping becomes free and no problems are created? Well, for that to happen, the Islamic Republic must not exist. Otherwise, they won't let it go. Right now, the situation that has arisen for the US was a very ideal situation in June. Inflation came down from 4.2% in May to 3.5%. Inflation had the biggest drop since 6 years ago. Gas prices came down. Well, you do these things again, and today, oil has increased in price by 15% compared to 4 days ago. Brent crude oil. As a result, doing these things again leads to the same thing. It defeats the purpose. Oil goes up, gas prices go up, dissatisfaction in the US increases. Consequently, these midterm elections might also be affected. I don't really know what the goal of starting this war all over again is. This question you are asking is also a question for me, because if these were going to achieve results, then stopping the war, going to the negotiating table, and signing a memorandum of understanding wouldn't make any sense at all. Why didn't they continue? In any case, this question is also on my mind.
Ms. Moravati, how much do you think the Persian Gulf Arab countries might change their position? Because it seems they have been extremely considerate during this time. They were very conservative, despite numerous attacks by the Islamic Republic. More or less, almost all of them were looking for a political solution. Is it possible that their threshold of tolerance might also come to an end?
Well, look, it was predictable that such a thing would happen. Many times on this very television, I personally said that the possibility of forming an Arab or even an Arab-Hebrew coalition might exist, given that the Islamic Republic doesn't want to get along even with that traditional tolerance and conservatism and the way Arab governments behave, and wants more than that. Therefore, it was understandable that in this situation, the Arab countries would finally be forced to take action. Although these countries were not able to secure their interests on their own, now with this minimal coalition that has currently formed, or let's say is forming, they can control the Islamic Republic to some extent, especially since the US government is aligned with them. But the important point is that for now, up to this stage, the Israeli government has not entered the field. Look, when Israel fully enters the conflict field, I truly believe a lot of geopolitical dynamics will change. If Israel enters this arena, it won't be like the last time when Netanyahu listened to Donald Trump's words. Back then, when Trump asked him not to make any more moves, they refrained from taking direct action against the Islamic Republic. If Israel enters the field now, it seems that major developments have already taken shape, or are currently taking shape, signaling a true and serious sense of war. Because in that case, it is very important for the Netanyahu government to achieve its key interests and security considerations. For now, outside of the Israeli government, it is these Arab countries whose regional order has been disrupted, and regional arrangements require them, by aligning with each other, to finally put aside that caution and mediation starting from Qatar, or the conservatism of the Saudi government, to, for example, the appeasement of the UAE government. Consequently, these nations have collectively reached a critical juncture where they must formulate a unified, decisive response against the persistent threats posed by the Islamic Republic. This hostile actor continues to launch aggressive attacks targeting not only military installations, but also critical civilian infrastructure, residential, neighborhoods, and key economic assets. Establishing a robust, coordinated defense mechanism is no longer optional. It represents the only viable path to guaranteeing their long-term regional security, stability, and sovereignty in the face of ongoing hostility. Furthermore, a crucial geographical reality must be recognized. The combined landmass of all 6 of these neighboring countries is less than twice the physical size of Iran. This stark geographical disparity highlights their individual vulnerability and lack of strategic depth. Consequently, these nations simply cannot afford the luxury of pursuing fragmented, independent security policies. To effectively safeguard their national interests, protect their populations, and deter future aggression, they must actively foster a deep coalition and commit to seamless strategic cooperation, as unilateral efforts will inevitably fail to counter such a formidable and resourceful adversary.
Mr. Shariat Salar, the first time the U.S. started the naval blockade of Iran, it temporarily stopped it with this MOU, or Memorandum of Understanding. Now Mr. Trump says that it will start again tonight, in about 5 or 6 hours, against Iran. Do you think this naval blockade will lead to more reactions from Iran to attack regional countries, or will it lead to a retreat?
It is critical to determine the exact threshold of the Islamic Republic's tolerance under pressure. If a strict naval blockade begins to pose a genuine existential threat to the regime, then launching targeted retaliatory attacks against the vital oil infrastructure of neighboring regional countries becomes a highly probable scenario. The Islamic Republic has historically demonstrated its willingness to cross such geopolitical red lines, making these aggressive defensive measures a distinct possibility. If it becomes an existential threat, Mr. Farahzad, the Aramco facilities, the ADNOC facilities belonging to the UAE, and the ports of Fujairah and Jebel Ali, these are all in danger. It's not like we can say only that place will be blockaded and the Islamic Republic will be brought to its knees. This system, by the way, there's a very interesting interview with this Mr. Majid Shakari. I don't know if you've heard his name. Behind the scenes, he is one of the key current strategists of the Islamic Republic and has always accompanied the negotiating team. In a recent television interview with the IRIB, he declared, "We are ready to be martyred to the last man, but not lose our control over the Strait of Hormuz. This control is so crucial to them that if it is removed, and if a naval blockade seriously threatens them, it would endanger the very existence of the Islamic Republic. They won't respect any red lines. They will attack all those oil facilities there, and the oil story, in my opinion, will get worse than before, and it won't get any better." There are two ways in front of Mr. Trump. Either he has to reach an agreement with them or destroy the Islamic Republic. To destroy the Islamic Republic, we saw that even a widespread war, which was that 39-day war, didn't work. Consequently, the only viable military alternative would be to systematically dismantle the entire critical infrastructure of that mission, including its power grids and transport networks. However, as Donald Trump himself has pointed out, there is a strong reluctance to jeopardize the lives and futures of some 91 million citizens who would bear the brunt of such devastation. Furthermore, the broader geopolitical consequences of targeting key oil installations across regional countries are completely unpredictable and highly volatile, threatening global energy markets. For these reasons, decision makers are highly unlikely to pursue such an extreme path. Yet, if they were to proceed in that direction, the ultimate outcome remains entirely uncertain. It is impossible to foresee how a conflict of this magnitude would escalate or what the final devastating results would be for the international community.
Ms. Moravati, in just a few hours tonight, Eastern Standard Time, United States President Donald Trump is scheduled to address the American public in a highly anticipated live broadcast. While the administration has remained quiet, widespread speculation suggests his remarks will focus on escalating regional tensions and the threat of war with Iran. Do you believe we might hear the president announce a dramatic shift in America's military posture? Could this involve deploying ground forces or occupying strategic Gulf islands? Or will he stick to the established pattern of occasional targeted airstrikes, avoiding any significant escalation that could inadvertently drag the nation into a prolonged, costly, and highly unpredictable military conflict?
I believe his speech will focus heavily on the war's domestic impacts, specifically how it has affected the energy sector and prices for the American people. Another portion will address foreign policy. However, regarding the deployment of ground troops, Trump's letter to Congress indicates the likelihood of this is very slim, though we cannot say it is completely out of the question. They'll leave this for the very last stage. The last stage is where they see, as Mr. Shariat Salar said, unless by destroying the Islamic Republic, the US government can actually find a solution. I mean, the ground military option is very, very unlikely under the current circumstances. But regarding the islands, especially Karg Island, which Trump has talked about many times, meaning he has talked about either capturing Karg Island or destroying Karg Island, whereby destroying it, he actually means the oil and energy facilities on this island. Looking at this situation through a strictly military lens yields some compelling insights, while attempting a full-scale physical occupation of the territory presents immense logistical and strategic difficulties. Opting for targeted destruction is a highly plausible scenario. This destructive approach would likely serve as the critical first phase to systematically sever the vital economic lifelines of the Islamic Republic, ultimately forcing their leadership to back down. You make an excellent point here. This outcome is entirely feasible because the United States government possesses possesses the overwhelming military capability, advanced intelligence security apparatus, and global hegemonic structure necessary to execute such a campaign successfully. But as for whether it can successfully hold on to it in the long run, well, we have to think about that a bit more. Regarding the potential destruction of Karg Island's crucial oil facilities, we must consider that a major portion of global exports, especially crude oil, is processed in this vital region. Any destruction could very easily trigger massive volatility in global energy markets, which, well, naturally the US government would also suffer from economically. Unless, of course, the US government actually finds a clever middle ground solution. This means that, for example, instead of causing catastrophic damage to these critical facilities, it could, say, take physical control of the island itself to secure the uninterrupted flow. If it can do such a thing, or if it's done, if it can hold on to it stably. Though, on the other hand, we see the government of the Islamic Republic, which will definitely react. And I think, to sum it up, Mr. Trump wants to tell the American people that they will naturally win this war. At least he's presenting it this way for propaganda purposes. He wants to reassure the people that he won't let it have real economic impacts on their lives because of the considerations that exist, both the midterm elections issue and also because he doesn't want to lose his popularity and influence, actually, among his fellow party members and those supporters of his in the MAGA movement and a major part of American society.
Thank you both very much for your expert analysis. That was Shahir Shahid Salis, an international relations and Iran analyst joining us from Calgary, and Leila Muravati, a political analyst speaking from Helsinki. Turning now to the main political story today, Ali al-Zaidi, the newly appointed prime minister of Iraq, has embarked on his highly anticipated first foreign trip. During a landmark meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump at the White House, al-Zaidi declared that future bilateral relations will pivot toward robust economic cooperation rather than military dependency. Echoing this strategic shift, President Trump remarked that the active involvement of American oil companies in Iraq would eventually diminish the necessity of maintaining a U.S. military presence in the country. According to Trump, countries in the region, including Iraq, no longer fear Iran because U.S. attacks have greatly reduced Tehran's military capability, and it no longer can bully the Middle East.
There anymore.
We don't think we need military forces there in Iraq. There are oil companies that will have their partnership with Iraq, and it's a very good relationship. We don't need military forces in Iraq. We are there to protect them if necessary. In my view, the main rival was Iran, which, well, in my view, was a heavy burden on Iraq's shoulders, and it's a problem, and a bully for the entire Middle East. But, well, this problem won't last, because Iran has become highly destabilized.
We are joined by our correspondent, Ardavan Rouzbeh, reporting live from the U.S. State Department. Ardavan, this is a highly significant diplomatic trip taking place at a critical moment involving a key nation that uniquely maintains close strategic ties with both Tehran and Washington.
This matter is highly significant because Ali al-Zaidi made a serious promise to resolve the long-standing issue of the American presence in Iraq, which has persisted since 2003. According to U.S. media, this represents a completely different start. At the same time, Zaidi's inaugural trip to the United States not only highlights the nature of their connection, but also signals a fundamental new definition of the future U.S.-Iraq relationship. This signals a new bilateral relationship that will no longer be based on a foreign military presence. Instead, this transition will open the door for major U.S. corporations to enter Iraq, particularly in the critical fields of energy, industrial development, and infrastructure. As we speak, Mr. Zaidi is at the Pentagon and is scheduled to hold more serious talks with the American side regarding the vital energy sector. He will also have meetings with key U.S. diplomats and, upon his return, will try to take highly lucrative, serious contracts back with him, or at least prepare the official drafts of these bilateral business agreements. In an official diplomatic move, the U.S. State Department has actively reposted Donald Trump's remarks, strongly emphasizing that this newly proposed bilateral path will heavily focus on boosting local energy sectors, encouraging foreign investment, and driving substantial job creation across Iraq. On the other hand, Iraqi official Ali al-Zaidi also emphasized during his recent high-level meeting that, practically starting from September 30th, the country will begin to experience a fundamentally different, restructured kind of American presence in the region. Let us now transition position and listen closely to the specific details of Zaidi's remarks.
And this is the first visit.
This is my first trip to the United States of America, and, well, this is not an ordinary meeting. We will announce the business partnerships after my talks with you, and by September 30th, U.S. troops will withdraw from Iraq, but American companies will remain in Iraq. And, of course, economic and social relations are not like military relations. By the end of this year or the beginning of next year, we will have the National Sovereignty Conference in the region, and our armed forces will have the capability to support and protect our borders. So after September 30th, we won't accept any group being armed outside of the legitimate government groups.
But Zaidi's remarks also had another very important part. Actually, he's pointing out that after the American withdrawal on September 30th, or May 8th, practically no group will be armed, and weapons will only be in the hands of the government. This is an important point that, for years and years, the Islamic Republic has used as a tool of pressure the existence of proxy groups affiliated with the Islamic Republic, Shia groups. It has practically been something that played a very key role in destabilizing the region, with Iraq at its center. Now, Mr. Zaidi is saying that these groups will no longer be allowed to operate, but Mr. Trump, also emphasizing that Ali al-Zaidi is considered a future leader of the Middle East, stressed that they are extraordinarily ready to utilize Iraq's economic capacities, with the presence of major companies in the region, even Arab companies from the Persian Gulf, companies like the American company Chevron, and companies of this sort. They plan to construct a highly strategic pipeline stretching from Iraq to the Syrian borders, which will transport Iraqi crude oil. This crucial infrastructure effectively redefines how Iraq exports its oil, allowing it to bypass the volatile Persian Gulf shipping lanes and the cycle of insecurity created by the Islamic Republic there. Furthermore, Mr. al-Zaidi strongly emphasized that Iraq requires a massive investment of at least $400 billion for reconstruction. He said there shouldn't be any concern because Iraq doesn't intend to withdraw from OPEC, but it needs people to look at this country with more generosity so it can sell its products and shape a new future Iraq. A very important point here is that now the discussion is about the fact that the important reality, just as Mr. Trump is saying, maybe the Islamic Republic, to the extent that in the past its rogue behavior could have a major impact on the region, especially completely influencing Iraqi governments, to the point where in many cases they were subordinate to the views of the Islamic Republic. Now in practice, what Mr. Trump is saying is that the powerful Islamic Republic that used to play its own game in the region no longer exists, and this is the best opportunity for Iraq to think about its own capabilities. But there's a subtle point here. Analysts in the West say Mr. Ali al-Zaidi must be able to prove that he can really cut off the hands of proxy groups and the Islamic Republic to bring about stability, so that all of these things can happen after that.
I extend my sincere thanks to my State Department colleague, Sardavan Ruzbeh. Thank you to Ardavan Ruzbeh, my colleague at the U.S. State Department. Middle East analyst Ghassan Ashur also joins us from Boston. Mr. Ashur, Iraqis are in a very complex, difficult position. While they are a strategic U.S. ally in the region, the neighboring Islamic Republic also holds immense influence there. How much does this situation pressure the Iraqi Prime Minister, particularly now that Iran and the United States are involved in an active conflict?
Talk is famously cheap. While the recent statements on paper look highly promising, we must remember that very good things have been said by both sides before, and this is far from the first time we are hearing such optimistic rhetoric. In the past, we have heard various other declarations, some of which were not nearly as positive as today's remarks, yet those were never actually implemented anyway. There remains a massive, persistent gap between high-level diplomatic discussions and real physical execution on the ground. Historically, American companies and officials showed very little genuine interest in investing in the Iraqi economy. One of the primary reasons, and perhaps the most significant root cause, was that they simply did not have enough security to operate safely. Without stability, today's talks will also fail to materialize. Even now, this situation hasn't changed. In fact, some of these groups are willing to hand over their weapons. At least they're willing to do so on paper. But other groups that take orders directly from Iran have already announced that they aren't willing to hand over their weapons. So in the future, they might also target the interests of the US, or rather American companies, if they are present in Iraq in the event of a conflict between Iran and the US. Right now, at least the Group 2 major groups, al-Nujaba and Kataib, Hezbollah remains completely unwilling to surrender its arsenal of weapons, even in a scenario where American military forces agree to fully withdraw from key regions like southern and central Iraq. This stubborn refusal to disarm presents a major obstacle for Prime Minister al-Sudani, who is actively trying to reform the country's security and political landscape. Furthermore, this persistent domestic threat directly undermines the strategic economic plans of the United States, particularly their stated intentions to inject significant financial investments into the region, which desperately requires a stable and secure environment to succeed. Another significant problem this situation creates is for the strategic oil pipeline proposed to run from Iraq to Syria. In reality, regional authorities want to resurrect and restart this historical pipeline, which has been almost completely defunct and shut down for nearly 50 years. However, executing such an ambitious energy project remains entirely impossible without first establishing comprehensive, watertight security for the infrastructure inside Iraqi territory. Unfortunately, current developments suggest this level of stability is far from being achieved. On the ground, there is virtually no reliable security to protect these assets. Compounding this issue is Iran's geopolitical agenda in the region. We must remember that Iraq possesses the capability to produce its own natural gas to meet domestic needs, but instead they currently resort to flaring it off as waste, largely due to external political pressures and persistent internal instability. The investment Iraq has made in buying gas and electricity from Iran, the same money it paid to Iran, or is currently holding for Iran in Iraqi banks to hand over once sanctions are lifted. If they had invested that same money, they would probably be producing more gas than they actually need by now. They would be producing more electricity than they need. But instead of doing that, under Iran's influence, given that those close to Iran are in power, instead of this money being invested to produce gas, oil, and electricity in Iraq, they handed it over to Iran so that Iran could make these investments domestically and then export back to Iraq. So we shouldn't really ignore Iranian influence here either, especially since corrupt individuals benefit from this, meaning when they are told that they will get a percentage of this money back, for example, from militias close to Iran. They prefer to cooperate with Iran, even though it harms Iraq's economic and security interests. They ignore these national concerns and continue this relationship solely because of the massive bribes they reportedly receive from these contracts. The issue is more complicated than Mr. Trump simply expressing a desire to invest. In practice, American companies will likely have no interest because security in Iraq and the wider region, exacerbated by US-Iran tensions, is not at a level where serious investment can happen. Even in other highly developed countries in the region, like the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Qatar, where wealthy foreigners, Americans, and Europeans historically sought to invest, they probably won't be returning anytime soon. I mean, even if the geopolitical conflicts between Iran and the US, or Israel and Iran, were to completely end today, regional risk profiles don't drop overnight. It would likely take at least a year or two of absolute peace before foreign corporations feel safe enough to resume investing there. Consequently, if international companies aren't willing to risk their capital in these wealthy Gulf nations, they certainly won't choose to invest in a much more unstable Iraq. I just want to add that regarding the complex issue of armed militias in Iraq, we have likely seen some positive progress lately, primarily due to Iran's influence being weakened. However, this welcome step forward absolutely does not mean that these powerful groups have been completely disbanded, or that the threat they pose has been entirely neutralized.
Thank you, Ghassan Ashur, Middle East analyst, joining us from Boston. An hour ago, during a UN Security Council meeting on developments in Yemen and the Red Sea, Bahrain's representative said that attacks by Tehran and the Houthis threaten freedom of navigation. Meanwhile, the U.S. representative also called the Islamic Republic a threat to freedom of navigation and the global economy, warning that Tehran's threats to the Strait of Hormuz could pave the way for another attempt by the Houthis to block the Red Sea.
As Iran continues to escalate tensions by threatening the critical shipping lanes of the Strait of Hormuz, a pressing question arises: how long will it be before the Houthi rebels decide to mimic the aggressive behavior of their Iranian sponsors and financial backers in the Red Sea? Recently, they went as far as launching missiles toward Israel, boldly asserting that they possess the sole authority to dictate which international vessels are permitted to navigate through these vital global maritime trade routes. It doesn't matter to them whether it's a military or civilian ship. the Houthis want to decide who is allowed to pass through. It seems the Houthis believe that owning a missile launcher gives them the authority to decide what has the right to pass through international waterways. And as we've said many times in this council, we cannot allow that.
I am now joined by my colleague Mariam Rahmati, who is reporting live for us from the United Nations headquarters in New York City. Mariam, following the fragile ceasefire established between the Houthis and Saudi Arabia, alongside their tentative understanding with the United States to avoid direct confrontations, the group seemed to be maintaining a relatively low profile during this wider Iran-US conflict. However, that delicate stability appears to be shifting. There is now growing apprehension, particularly among diplomats within the Security Council, that the Houthis are increasingly engaging in the conflict and actively escalating their dangerous involvement in this regional game.
That is absolutely correct, Fardad. Geopolitical tensions in Yemen and the Red Sea are escalating rapidly, prompting deep concern among members of the United Nations Security Council. Here at the UN headquarters, various diplomats are expressing their profound anxiety over a potentially coordinated maritime threat. They worry that, on one hand, the Islamic Republic of Iran might continue to disrupt the vital Strait of Hormuz, making crucial international shipping lanes highly unsafe. On the other hand, there is growing apprehension that Tehran is actively coordinating with Houthi rebels in Yemen. The fear is that these forces will align to launch synchronized maritime attacks, systematically disrupting shipping corridors throughout the Red Sea, which could severely impact global commerce, disrupt critical supply chains, and trigger a broader regional conflict. Indeed, this will undoubtedly remain a major issue of grave concern for Security Council members, and honestly, for all UN member states who rely on stable, secure, international shipping lanes for global trade. And that is precisely why, Fardad, we witnessed this second urgent Security Council meeting in just the last 2 days, focusing on Yemen, the Houthis, and the deteriorating Red Sea security situation, convened here today at the United Nations headquarters in New York. Today's critical session was specifically focused on the Security Council members voting to extend the UN Secretary General's official reporting mandate regarding these ongoing Houthi attacks on commercial vessels in the Red Sea for an additional 6 months to ensure continuous oversight. During this morning's pivotal United Nations Security Council meeting, the overarching focus of the discussions centered heavily on the destabilizing role played by the Islamic Republic of Iran in the ongoing conflict in Yemen. High-ranking representatives from the United States, the United Kingdom, France, Denmark, and several other allied member states united in their condemnation. They specifically accused Tehran of exploiting recent aviation routes, pointing to suspicious flights conducted on July 4th and just yesterday. These flights allegedly transported advanced military equipment, specialized Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps (IRGC) personnel, sophisticated missile and drone technologies, and substantial logistical aid directly to Houthi rebel forces. The coalition of nations strongly emphasized that these clandestine operations not only flagrantly violate Yemen's national sovereignty, but also constitute direct breaches of long-standing Security Council. Furthermore, international observers expressed grave concern that at any moment the vital shipping lanes of the Red Sea could witness the exact same destabilizing situation that we are currently witnessing in the Strait of Hormuz. Addressing these fears, the U.S. representative, Mike Waltz, delivered a very sharp and critical speech. He pointedly argued that if the Islamic Republic of Iran is prepared to threaten the Strait of Hormuz, it is only a matter of time before the Houthis copy their sponsor and ideological role model in Tehran, taking direct action to shut down the Red Sea. He directly raised this critical question with the Council members because the United States strongly urges all Security Council members to fully implement and enforce existing international sanctions. The goal is to actively block the Islamic Republic of Iran from illicitly transferring sophisticated weapons to the Houthi rebels, thereby preventing them from acquiring the military capabilities needed to launch devastating regional attacks. Just as persistent threats from the Houthi rebels have escalated in recent weeks, they have explicitly declared their intentions to target Israeli-linked vessels once again. Furthermore, senior officials of the Islamic Republic of Iran have repeatedly suggested establishing strategic coordination between the critical choke points of the Strait of Hormuz and the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, leveraging Houthi militants to systematically disrupt global maritime security. These looming threats continue to fuel international anxiety, leaving the global community waiting to see if the United Nations Security Council will finally take decisive practical action to secure these vital trade routes. Fardad.
Thank you, Mariam Rahmati. From the UN headquarters in New York, Shayan Sami, national security expert, has also joined us from Virginia. Mr. Sami, right now, this Strait of Hormuz crisis and the Islamic Republic's attacks on ships in this waterway are among the issues that won't let go of the Americans if the Houthis really enter the game completely, and there are signs of this. If the Islamic Republic really wants to use their card in the Red Sea, and Bab el-Mandeb as well, how much more difficult will things get for the Americans?
My greetings to you, the very dear Mr. Fardad, and to all the brave people of Iran. Look, the Islamic Republic can cause significant trouble by strategically using the Houthi forces in Yemen. It can easily add another complex layer to the existing layers of geopolitical conflict, especially for the United States and its key Western allies. Why is this? Because we know that Tehran does not view the Houthis merely as a localized Yemeni rebel group. Instead, the Islamic Republic aims to simultaneously control two of the world's most vital maritime choke points by exerting dominance over both the Strait of Hormuz and the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. They seek to hold global energy markets hostage and disrupt vital international trade routes at will. Such hostile actions cause severe trouble for global trade, disrupt vital international shipping lanes, and threaten the stability of the global energy market. The Islamic Republic strategically aims to raise the costs of maritime, insurance, cargo transit, and overall economic operations so high for the international community that it can effectively exert coercive influence through geopolitical bullying, forcing key concessions to get exactly what it wants from the world. Furthermore, history has repeatedly shown that the Islamic Republic utilizes proxy groups like the Houthis as convenient, deniable leverage to execute its disruptive foreign policy agenda without facing direct accountability. This critical threshold is precisely where the global community's role must fundamentally change. If the United States and its strategic coalition of international allies fail to act decisively at this very moment, the consequences will be felt globally by everyone. Don't stand firm against the Islamic Republic and don't compel the Islamic Republic to accept that it must also be politically and strategically responsible for the Houthis. It can't just use the Houthis as leverage, but then immediately turn around and say, we have no responsibility. They are a free group. They are acting on their own. If the United States cannot show the Houthis to be so intertwined with the Islamic Republic that it leaves no room for denial for the Islamic Republic, then in fact, the Islamic Republic has gained the upper hand. Furthermore, I believe the Islamic Republic intentionally seeks to orchestrate widespread disruption across various regions. Specifically, they target critical global waterways and shipping lanes vital to international trade. By destabilizing these economic arteries, the regime hopes to gain crucial geopolitical leverage, ultimately securing an escape route to guarantee its own survival for another 6 months or perhaps a year.
To what extent do you believe Saudi Arabia can play a pivotal role in resolving this regional conflict? While the Houthi rebels represent a relatively new threat to international maritime shipping lanes and the United States military, they are a familiar, long-standing adversary for the Saudis, who have fought them directly for nearly a decade. Looking at the dynamics of the recent airstrikes, particularly those targeting the strategic Sana'a airport, it appears that Riyadh acted with a tacit green light from Washington. Ultimately, do you foresee Saudi Arabia indirectly transforming into a major active participant in the broader US-Iran proxy confrontation, simply by trying to contain Houthi aggression?
You make an exceptionally interesting point, and I agree with you completely. Indeed, within certain influential political and diplomatic circles in the United States, there is an ongoing discussion regarding the strategic motivations of Washington. Analysts suggest that some U.S. officials, and perhaps specific factions within the broader government apparatus, are seeking to leverage the complex Houthi conflict in Yemen as a geopolitical tool. The underlying objective, according to this perspective, is to drag Saudi Arabia back into direct military confrontation with the Islamic Republic of Iran. This is crucial because prior to these escalations, Riyadh was actively pursuing diplomatic engagement and normalization with Tehran to secure regional stability. By drawing Saudi Arabia back into active warfare, these U.S. actors would effectively disrupt this peaceful rapprochement, forcing Riyadh to abandon its diplomatic path to avoid another devastating, prolonged regional war. But considering the Houthi issue and the fact that the Islamic Republic is bringing them into the conflict, and it was Saudi Arabia that entered the conflict in Yemen in the first place, and actually allowed the Houthis to project power like this, and allowed the Islamic Republic to be active there as well. Absolutely. I believe that the United States will make a great effort to use this strategy to get Saudi Arabia on the same page and stand up more against the Islamic Republic.
Thank you so much, Shaheen Sani, our national security expert, joining us live from Virginia for providing that insightful analysis. For those of you tuning into our broadcast, instead of the highly anticipated France versus Spain match, we are incredibly grateful for your time. Millions of passionate football fans worldwide are currently glued to their screens watching this thrilling World Cup semifinal. As we speak, we are in the 13th minute of play, and it remains scoreless. We leave you now with these beautiful live images from Madrid, Spain, as we conclude tonight's program. Have a wonderful evening.